Good morning and welcome to Counterpoints. We have an amazing show today, don't we?
You're talking so quickly.
Amazing show.
It's an amazing
Look at my
show.
mug.
Oh, wow. Indeed we do. I think that's my cue card. It's like SNL. I need to look at the mugs for my line. We do, though, in fact, have a big show today, Brian. Lots of news, obviously, to cover out of the Middle East. We have election results from last night. I'm very curious to get your take on some of the election results, actually, out of Wisconsin. Interesting stuff there. Jon Stewart hosted Lena Khan on The Daily Show, and man, was it a fascinating conversation. Actually gets into some of the reasons, in fact, that the DOJ filed an antitrust suit against Apple just recently. We're going to be talking about an absolutely wild segment on The View that is probably the most evergreen way to put it. It's like we could say that every single week and come up with some clip.
They asked the question, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? We'll get Emily to answer that. We'll find out.
Yeah, we'll get Ana Navarro's take as well for just how the wealthy Manhattan dwellers are doing versus 4 years ago. Ryan, you ran a Twitter poll that we're going to talk about on the renaming of Dulles Airport, which is a Republican-led effort.
House Republicans want us to have, instead of a Dulles and Reagan Airport here in D.C. and Thurgood Marshall over in Baltimore, they want us to have a Trump and a Reagan airport. We're going to find out if that's actually better than Dulles.
Ryan, it's important to move beyond the Cold War.
Well, I guess so, yeah.
And you're going to lead us on a segment about Harry Dunn, who some people may remember from the fallout after January 6th, the hearings, the investigations. He was a central figure in all of that.
Yeah, he's now running for Congress in Maryland. And bizarrely, AIPAC could end up being his biggest obstacle to getting to Congress. We're going to talk about that. It's a bizarre story.
And we have a good guest.
Yes, Ahmed Khan, who has been on the show before. He's been on my podcast, Deconstructed. Leads relief efforts around the world, everywhere from Syria to Rwanda to Ukraine to Gaza. He's in Cyprus now, and he's going to talk about what it's like, trying to get relief supplies into Gaza, given the fact that the Israeli military appears willing to go to extraordinary lengths to make sure that this near famine tips into a famine by attacking aid workers, as we saw on Monday. And that's where we can start today. Yeah,
we might as well start right there. In fact, we can put this map up on the screen. Ryan, can you walk us through what we're looking at with A1? Right,
so this is the Convoy. That by now infamous Convoy that I'm sure if you're watching you have heard of this. This was the World Central Kitchen's effort to move hundreds of tons from Cyprus into Gaza, into the kitchens that were gradually kind of replacing the work that UNRWA had been doing and has been hobbled from doing. Let's not even get into that situation right now, but it goes to, I think, intent. The whack-a-mole effort that the world is making to kind of get aid in continues to meet the hammer of Israeli opposition to simply feeding the Palestinian population. So the three cars that you saw on that map there represent the places where each of them were struck. And we now know from reporting by Haaretz, Al Jazeera, and others that the first car was struck, and at that time the wounded in that vehicle were taken to the second vehicle, and the WCK workers had enough time to call their superiors because they had been in coordination with the IDF. And so at first, and these are the biggest, most good-hearted people on the planet, the fact that they're dedicating their lives to humanitarian relief efforts. So it's very hard for them, I think, to believe at first that they're being targeted by the IDF. So they're calling.
They're cooperating with the IDF.
They are constantly cooperating with the IDF, telling them what route they're in, et cetera. And so they call their superiors, tell them, call it off, we're getting struck. They then strike the second vehicle. The wounded that are still able to be moved to the third vehicle are moved, and then the drone strikes the third vehicle. And so the images that everybody has seen has shown the logo, World Central Kitchen on the top. So there's just no credible way that anybody could say that this was anything other than deliberate. Now, Haaretz reported that the IDF's initial explanation was that the drone operators believed that they saw an armed person on the convoy when it went into the warehouse. But they did not see that armed person when they left the warehouse. Now, we know that's 3 security people, I think one from Ireland, one from Britain, one from somewhere else, died in this attack. So just pause on that for a second. So they think that they see a convoy that they know is a World Central Kitchen convoy. And they
just left the warehouse.
Just left the warehouse. And on the way in, they thought they saw a person with a weapon. They don't see that person with the weapon on the convoy. But let's say they did.
Yeah.
First of all, why would a convoy not have a person with a weapon going through a dangerous area?
A war zone.
A war zone.
Right.
Second, what that's saying is that their rules of engagement suggest that if they suspect that there's a single, let's say even a terrorist, a single Hamas fighter within this convoy, that their rules of engagement allow them to light up the entire convoy and methodically chase the victims from one vehicle to another until they're all killed. That's their own explanation.
Except their premise, right? If you accept their premise. Right, yes, exactly. And I don't think the Israeli government has commented on this yet, but Israeli media has reported that, yes, there's a suspected militant embedded with the convoy. We don't know exactly what their explanation is, but if you take their premise at face value, it's still outrageous. Right,
and it is incredible they would think that an armed person with a convoy, with armored cars and everything, is a militant, like, maybe it's the Irish guy they hired to do security.
And you've made this point before that when you're part of the big challenge, if you are the IDF, and let's say again in a hypothetical world, you want to prosecute the most ethical war to the extent that's not an oxymoron. You want to prosecute the most ethical war possible. The fact that Hamas is essentially the de facto government of the Gaza Strip, it makes it incredibly difficult. There's no question about that. The infrastructure.
If anybody's doing security, it's going to be like a Hamas-linked police force.
Absolutely, and that's like one of the things with UNRWA.
That would not excuse killing a bunch of aid workers that were with them.
Exactly, and that's one of the big challenges in the UNRWA debate. Jose Andres, Sohrab Ahmari made a really good point about this. Jose Andres was furious at the Spanish government for not being sort of supportive enough of Israel after October 7th. This is Jose Andres' nonprofit, World Central Kitchen, as many people know, that's doing the aid work that was destroyed, that was killed. So, it's just, again, it's horrible.
Right. And so that's why you have, we can put up this next element. Here's Fran Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur, saying, knowing how Israel operates, my assessment is that Israeli forces intentionally killed World Central Kitchen workers so that donors would pull out and civilians in Gaza could continue to be starved quietly. Israel knows Western countries and most Arab countries won't move a finger for the Palestinians. So let's see how John Kirby responded at the White House yesterday. By the way, the State Department canceled its briefing. A rare occurrence. And then they were like, let's let John Kirby just handle this one. So let's see how John Kirby handled this one.
Is firing a missile at people delivering food and killing them not a violation of international humanitarian law?
Well, the Israelis have already admitted that this was a mistake that they made. They're doing an investigation. They'll get to the bottom of this. Let's not get ahead of that. Your question presumes at this very early hour that it was a deliberate strike, that they knew exactly what they were hitting, that they were hitting aid workers and did it on purpose, and there's no evidence of that. I would also remind you, sir, that we continue to look at incidents as they occur. The State Department has a process in place. And to date, as you and I are speaking, they have not found any incidents where the Israelis have violated international humanitarian law. And lest you think we don't take it seriously, I can assure you that we do. We look at this in real time.
They have never violated international humanitarian law ever in the past 5 to 6 months.
I'm telling you, the State Department has looked at incidents in the past and has yet to determine that any of those incidents violate international humanitarian law.
It really raises the question of what the point of international humanitarian law is. If that's true, you could kill hundreds, more than 200 aid workers, more than 100 journalists, hundreds of nurses and doctors, leave a population of 2.3 million displaced and their homes in rubble, and not violate international law. But I wanted to play, unless you have a response.
No, let's move to this other one.
Another Kirby clip. So notice his body language there. Notice how animated he was in defense of Israel there. At the top of the press briefing, he was kind of forced to read a statement that was critical of Israel. And I want you to notice the difference in the body language when he's kind of forced to be critical and when he's voluntarily defending them. There's only one moment that he gets animated in this clip that we're about to play, and it's when he thinks he's going to be about to pivot into a defense of Israel, but then he realizes he's not, and goes back into kind of a mumbling, kind of forced, almost like hostage-like reading of criticism of Israel. Here's Kirby at the top of that briefing.
As we understand it, a preliminary investigation has been completed today and presented to the Army Chief of Staff, and we'll obviously look to see what they discover in this preliminary one. But we expect a broader investigation to be conducted and to be done so in a swift and comprehensive manner. We hope that those findings will be made public and that there is appropriate accountability held. More than 200 aid workers have been killed in this conflict, making it one of the worst for aid workers in recent history. This incident is emblematic of a larger problem and evidence of why distribution of aid in Gaza has been so challenging. But what beyond the strike, what is clear is that the IDF must do much more to improve deconfliction processes so that civilians and humanitarian aid workers are protected. The U.S. will continue to press Israel to do more as well to ensure the safety of humanitarian workers, and will continue to do all we can to deliver this assistance to Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Thank you.
Thanks. John, do you have any worries regarding Israel and Gaza about the floating dock? And how can aid workers be protected?
Worries? What do you mean by worries?
What do you even say to that?
That was his scripted, if you were listening to this, that was the scripted remarks portion of his appearance at yesterday's White House briefing. That wasn't during Q&A. He actually moved to Q&A right after that, which you may have heard.
And the first question is, do you have any worries? He's like, worries? What worries? Goes back into his flip routine. Lest you think we're being unfair to Kirby, let's go to Barak Ravid, who is a reporter for Axios, formerly served in the Israeli military. So we're not talking about somebody who is, some kind of radical Hamas supporter here. So let's get Barak Ravid's analysis of this on CNN.
The movement of this convoy was coordinated with the IDF. This convoy moved on a road that is a humanitarian corridor that the IDF knows that cars that are driving on this road are carrying humanitarian aid. The IDF is a partner of the World Central Kitchen in its work in Gaza. It gives security to the boat that is coming from Cyprus and delivering the aid. It's not some rogue group that started delivering aid in Gaza. It was all coordinated. And this is why the claim that this was, quote unquote, unintentional raises a lot of questions.
Yeah, and to go back to Kirby's point, his claim that there's no evidence that Israel knew that this was an aid convoy is a lie. Like, I don't use the word lie often with these spokespeople because usually they're gaslighting, they're spinning, they're BSing. And they're tethered somewhat to like a little piece of the truth.
Their job is to be very clever at avoiding a lie.
There is lots of evidence that they knew this was a convoy. Like A, the fact that the convoy was communicating with the IDF. Like B, the fact that it said World Central Kitchen on the rooftops. C, that Haaretz has reported they knew it was a convoy. But they thought there was a militant associated with it. So it's just a flat out disgusting lie to cover up a war crime.
And so Netanyahu responded, and we can play the video of that. This is, if you're watching, you see Netanyahu's response. And the translation is here. Unfortunately, a tragic instance of our forces unintentionally harming innocent people in the Gaza Strip. It happens in war. We'll investigate it. We're in contact with the governments, and we will do everything so that it doesn't happen again.
Just so we can be as perfectly fair as we can to Netanyahu, in this clip, in the first half, he's talking about how he himself has left the hospital and has recovered from his procedure that he underwent. And he thanks the people that cared for him. And then the second half, he transitions to talking about this tragic incident. He says, "This is war, but we'll investigate it." And people have slammed him for the kind of joyfulness with which he's delivering this message. And it's understandable to talk about the joy of thanking those who treated you, but he remains that that effervescence kind of remains as he continues to talk about the tragedy and that this is war and we're going to investigate this. There's no solemnity. There's no suggestion in the body language that there's any disappointment or sadness from the Israeli leadership that this has happened, because if the intention was to tighten the grip of starvation on the population, it's working like a charm.
I think it's also worth mentioning a Jerusalem Post headline. This is from earlier this week. Friendly fire, IDF helicopter pilot shot at Israeli soldiers after pressing wrong button. It's not just, again, this is like if you are
Time to stop sending weapons, I think, to this army, this military.
And John Kirby, he had a quote where he said, the IDF must do much more. And that was in reference to protecting civilians and aid workers. And it's, Ryan, it is interesting to have the American government in a defense of Israel saying that actually the IDF must do, quote, much more, not some more, not more, much more to defend civilians and aid workers, while at the same time maintaining the posture that you just mentioned.
Right.
That's a really, really difficult position.
Right. And if you're Israel, why would you? If your goal is to ethnically cleanse the Palestinian population from Gaza, and the United States is willing to arm you no matter what you do, like, why would you not kill aid workers, kill healthcare workers, like attack every hospital in Gaza, make the place unlivable, and expect that the American government will continue to support you all the way?
So this is what's especially, like, for Netanyahu, that question of what comes next, like day after, what do you actually want to do with the Gaza Strip? That's why all of this continues to be an untenable and position, period, because they don't know they have no agreement, consensus at all on what comes next. There are people that don't want to take any control of the Gaza Strip in Israel, that don't want that to happen. There are people who very, very, very much do and don't want to give up an inch of it, want every last inch of the Gaza Strip back under Israeli control or whatever it is. So that's how the war ends up being prosecuted in just an utterly bizarre and tragic way.
And what predictably came next is, we can roll this clip relative to the aid shipments.
This is about the killing of 7 aid workers in the Gaza Strip with World Central Kitchen, the charity. We're now hearing from Cyprus that the aid ships that have been travelling from Cyprus into Gaza, of course, this was a big development for those in Gaza, that the aid was able to come in that way. Aid ships are now being turned around, still carrying aid. 240 tonnes of undelivered aid is now heading back to Cyprus because of this attack on a car, killing 7 aid workers, because the charity obviously unloading the ship and distributing that aid in Gaza. World Central Kitchen, one of those charities involved, has now suspended its operations because of this apparent Israeli airstrike.
And so the UAE has also suspended aid operations, saying that it can't guarantee that its personnel won't be killed by Israel. ANERA has paused its relief efforts. The World Central Kitchen paused its relief efforts. UNRWA has been banned by Congress and President Biden from getting any funding from the United States, and Israel has banned UNRWA from operating in northern Gaza. The predictable and intended consequence will be a rapidly expanding number of deaths by malnutrition and starvation and disease.
And again, this brings us back to the question just before we move on of, if Israel wants to admit that it's engaged in total war, if that's your tactic, if that's your strategy, they are not owning up to it. And I think
the most moral army in the world.
It's partially because there's disagreement in their own ranks, and there's disagreement with the United States, which is funding it to the tune of, like we've heard so many people in the Israeli government say, we could not continue the war without the unconditional support, basically, of the United States. The United States is attempting to kind of condition it with gentle guidance from the White House. Hey, let's, pull back on killing aid workers, and that's where you end up. So it's like, not only is it awful and tragic, it's also just glaringly dishonest and disorganized. The level of incompetence when you have a helicopter firing on their own soldiers. I mean, it's just.
And if the aid community believed that it was a fluke, kind of tragic accident, they would not be withdrawing all of their personnel from this situation. Like their blunt reaction to this
Yeah, that's true.
shows that they believe that this is deliberate.
As Barak Ravid wrote in that Axios article, the Emiratis handle much of the coordination with the Israeli government for the humanitarian mission, which has delivered tons of supplies to the enclave via ship from Cyprus over the past few weeks. So the Emiratis backing out it's not just some random country that said no. I mean, there's a huge component.
Yeah, they're the ones that Israel's always thinking is going to bail them out in the end. Like, oh, well, who's going to reconstruct this after we've destroyed it? Oh, we'll get the Emiratis and the Saudis to do that. You got Sullivan meeting with the Saudis now, pushing this delusional fantasy that they're going to come to some mega deal that involves Israeli normalization without any progress toward resolving the question of the Palestinians beyond simply annihilating them all.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.